Unit 3. The Books of Prime Entry and Ledgers. Session 1. Documents used in business. By the end of the session, you should be able to explain the meaning of source document, discuss the functions of source document, and describe some source document. Debit notes. Introduction. For accounting information to be useful for decision making, it must faithfully represent what it purports to represent. To faithfully represent what it purports to represent, it must be verifiable. Assurance about the economic reality of the transaction from which the accounting information was prepared. One way of verifying accounting information is through the evidence provided by source documents. For example, entries in the sales daybook must be backed by the sales invoice. Purpose of source document. The source documents provide evidence of the occurrence of business transactions. They identify and describe the transactions and events. They provide an objective, reliable, and verifiable source of accounting information. Basically, source documents give information to the other party, that is to tell a supplier what goods are required, and to enable an entity to keep its own records, for example, to know what goods have been ordered. They are termed value documents. They provide evidence of the value of accounting transactions. Examples of source documents include purchases requisition, letters of inquiry, quotation, delivery notes, pro forma invoice, voucher, invoice, credit note, debit note, receipts, among others. Purchase requisition. It is an internal document. It is a document filled by a department within an organization by which a person with authority to do so requesting for some items needed by the department. The document is forwarded to the purchasing department. This is how a purchase requisition may look like. Purchase order. It is prepared by a prospective buyer to a supplier to indicate his wish to buy certain goods. Letters of inquiry. Businesses send out letters of inquiry to potential suppliers to find out what suppliers are able to offer and the different prices charged. For example, suppliers' catalogs, price list, advertisements, telephone, and formal letters. Catalogs. It is a booklet which gives information about full range of goods a seller is prepared to sell. It gives information on prices, description, terms of payment, uses of the product, price list. It shows current prices and recent amendments and should be referred to before placing an order. Advice note. When an order is received from a buyer, an advice note may be forwarded to the buyer informing him that the order is acknowledged and has been dealt with. The product have been sent by a stated method of transport. Delivery note or dispatch note. A delivery note is a list of the products which have been sent by a supplier. The delivery note is given to the driver who is to convey the goods. The driver has to ensure that the delivery note is signed by the receiver and then retained by the driver of the goods as proof that the goods have been delivered. It is a useful document for checking the quantity and condition of the product. Pro forma invoice. It is of the same form as the invoice. It offers guidance to a buyer who may wish to know what the final invoice will look like before goods are forwarded to him. It serves to tell the customer how much he has to pay if he decides to take the goods. Statement of account. It is sent out by a supplier to his receivables, that is customers, usually at the end of the month. The statement shows the total amount owing by the customer. It lists the transactions which have occurred between them over a given period. The balance outstanding on the customer account at the start is shown, together with dates and particulars of all deliveries and payment received by the supplier. Pay-in slip. It is a document used to show that some amount of money has been deposited into a bank account. It can be used for both cash and check deposits. Voucher. A voucher is an internally generated document used within an organization to control cash disbursement and to ensure that a transaction is properly authorized and recorded. It serves as a proof and trace of any payment made by the accounts or finance department of an organization. Invoice. An invoice is a document sent to a buyer by a seller as evidence of sale or purchase transaction. It's used both especially for sales made on credit and and serves as demand for payment. Usually, sales on credit to customers are evidenced by sending invoices to the customer. The seller of the goods prepares the invoice and addresses it to the buyer. So to the seller, the invoice that is issued to the buyer is called a sales invoice, while to the buyer it is called a purchase invoice. Sales invoice is therefore a source document for the sales journal, whilst the purchase invoice is for the purchases journal. Credit note. It is issued by a seller to a buyer when the buyer returns goods to the seller. The credit note tells the buyer or customer that his or her account has been credited or reduced by the amount stated on the note in the books of the seller. The credit note is used as evidence when goods have been returned by the buyer because the goods are faulty, unsatisfactory, or damaged, or when the buyer's account have been overcharged. It is sent by a seller to a buyer with the intention of reducing the buyer's indebtedness. Debit note. It is a special invoice sent by a seller to a buyer, informing the buyer that his or her account is debited for reasons given on the note. A debit note is issued by the seller to the buyer if the buyer has been undercharged for goods supplied or more goods have been supplied to the buyer. Receipt. It is used in trade to acknowledge receipt of money by the seller and as evidence of payment by the purchaser of goods bought or services rendered. It shows evidence of payment of money. Quotation. A quotation is a written offer from a business to a client or prospective client to produce or supply goods at certain amount. Remittance advice is a document sent by a buyer detailing which invoices are being settled and credit notes being set off. In this session, we discuss the meaning of source document, describe the functions of source document, and describe some source document. Thank you.